Hello, I'm Ibrahim Imam, and welcome to another episode of the Neurology Lounge podcast. In this episode, we will continue our exploration of Guillain-Barre syndrome further. I'm joined today by Holly Francis, author of an illness memoir titled Life Support: Surviving Guillain-Barre Syndrome. And this book she referred to as the story of how she turned her medical horror after the birth of her daughter into a crusade of helping others. So it's a pre and a post memoir. Holly is a mom in a blended family of five and the face behind Holly after GBS on social media. And there, her recovery videos have inspired millions of people around the world. Whilst her main occupation is in human resources, her passion is in GBS advocacy and fitness. And that is what has brought her to my podcast today. Holly Francis, welcome to the Neurology Lounge podcast. And I'm most grateful you can spare me some time today.
Thank you so much. I'm very honored to be on your podcast and to share my story and talk more about Guillain-Barre syndrome and bring awareness to, the disease that a lot of people don't really know and understand.
It has a funny name, but yeah, I agree with you. Not many people know about it. And I guess that's the reason you wrote the book. Or did you have any other kind of reasons for putting it?
No, it's kind of a funny story. I mean, I've always really enjoyed writing. When I grew up, I was really, really great in LA in English, and I would just love, writing stories. I actually wrote like little books when I was like 5, 6 years old. So
Oh,
it was always something that I really enjoyed doing. And I just, loved piecing words together and making sentences and just editing. It was just a really big passion of mine. So even as a young child, it was something that I kind of wanted to do one day, but I didn't really have anything to write about. So, crazy enough, go through Guillain-Barre syndrome. And then, of course, I had something to write about and something to share with the world. So that was why I wrote the book.
loads of it. And your previous writings, were they fiction? And is kind of this is
Yeah, it was mostly just fiction stuff. I would do a little bit of, memoir stuff, just personal stories. But, obviously what I went through, I wanted to really share that key moment in my life.
okay. And so I'm assuming because you like writing, as soon as you were able to, did you start keeping a journal or what? How did you go about writing it?
Yeah, so I was in the hospital for quite a long time, and my mom was there with me by my side pretty much every day, and she actually kept a journal. She wanted to be able to show me my progress. I was paralyzed in ICU for quite a long time. I didn't really have any hope that I was going to get better, and so she was trying to document and show, here you are on this day, and here's some of the improvements you're making. So she actually had it all documented down in a calendar, and she took videos and she took pictures, which was very, very helpful for when I was writing the book, that I could go back in time and piece those moments together and put it all in order. And it was just amazing that I had those videos and that timeline to help me kind of go back to those times.
That was very helpful. And I can see where the writing interest comes from then if your mum
Yes.
likes to write. Okay. So your illness started suddenly, not too dramatically. It's slight tingle in your finger. What happened and what did you make of it at the time?
Yeah, so I mean, I had just given birth to my daughter about 3 weeks prior, and I was healthy, I had a C-section, but I was recovering at home and I was doing really well. Everything was going great. I was healthy, my daughter was healthy. And then, yeah, like you said, it started with a tingle in my finger. So I was sitting on the couch and I had this kind of tingling sensation, and it kind of felt like maybe I had burnt myself on something, and I was trying to think back to, like, did I touch a pot on the stove or something? Couldn't think of anything, and I just kind of brushed it off. And then it was, later that night that things got worse. But at the time, it didn't really alarm me because I was thinking, yeah, it's just probably a burn of some sort, and I just kind of ignored it.
Things that come and go. Mostly we can't.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you said later in the day things took a turn for the worse. What happened in the evening?
So later that night, I just felt run down. I felt really tired. I felt drained. I was walking around. Things just felt harder to do. It felt like walking just took a lot out of me. When I went up the stairs that night, it felt like I had to really consciously make an effort to lift my leg up to go up the stairs. So I was just getting weaker and weaker. And, at first I thought, maybe I'm just overly tired because I have a newborn and I haven't slept much and I'm just adjusting. I'm still recovering from surgery as well, from a C-section. So I just kind of brushed it off. Then I just started to kind of feel achy and weak and kind of tingly, like almost like I was getting the flu, like when you have the flu and you're getting a fever. So that's kind of how I started to feel. And then I had this pain in my neck. So this all happened pretty quickly, like within a couple hours, and this severe pain in my neck. And I'm thinking, okay, all of this is kind of tying together. Like, what is going on? Like, if it's the flu, why is my neck hurting? And why is my finger tingling? And so then I went on Google because that's what you do, right? You go
Yes.
on Google and say, what's wrong with me? And Google said you might have a pinched nerve. And so that's what I was thinking. And I said, okay, I think I have a pinched nerve. That makes sense. That's why I'm kind of having trouble walking, why I'm having trouble walking up the stairs. So that's what I thought. And I ended up going actually to a Medi Center because the pain got really, really bad. And I took some Advil and it wasn't getting any better, and I thought it might be kind of severe. And so I went to the Medi Center, and the Medi Center doctor actually said, I think, yeah, you're right. I think it's just a pinched nerve and you need to see a physiotherapist and I'll give you some more medication. And so I went home and I put my daughter to bed that night, and I was thinking, I'm going to feel better in the morning. I probably just need a good night's sleep, and once I wake up, I'm going to be fine. But at about 3 in the morning, my daughter woke up to nurse, and I actually went to her. I went to her bassinet, and my legs gave out on me, and I collapsed to the floor.
Hmm. That's very dramatic turn, obviously.
Yes, it
More
was
than
very,
one.
very sudden.
Yeah. And how did you get you called an ambulance, or was there somebody else, another adult in the house?
Yeah, yeah. So my daughter's father, my ex-husband, he was there at the time. I was able to stand up. I was able to get back up and kind of stand up and be like, okay, I'm okay.
Hmm.
But I fell and I feel like I'm losing weakness. And so I woke him up and I said, I think I need to go to the hospital. Can you take me there? So I had him just drop me off. I'm still thinking, it's just a pinched nerve. I didn't want my newborn baby in the emergency room of the hospital. So I said, just drop me off. I will call you guys in a bit to come pick me back up. And, I had no idea that that was going to be the last time that I would actually step foot of that hospital for another several months.
Wow, wow, wow. And I mean, the doctors were clued on to this diagnosis straight away as soon as they assessed you, was it?
It was fairly quickly. So I was first seen by a doctor in the ER, and he noted that I was losing weakness. I was losing my grip strength, and he knew something was wrong. But he said, I don't know what is wrong with you, so I'm going to have to call a neurologist. So I was grateful for that.
Yes.
Um, in it's awful that my progression was happening so quickly, because by the time that I saw the neurologist,
Yeah.
I could barely walk anymore. I had no reflexes, so because of that, I think it helped. So the neurologist that I saw was like, you know what, you've gone from this point to this point so quickly, and I do think it's Guillain Barre syndrome. So I was very, very lucky. And I don't know if you know much about like the diagnosis and stuff, but sometimes it can take a lot longer. So I was very fortunate
Yes.
that the doctor that I had seen, he'd seen a case of GBS before, so he recognized it.
The keys in the reflexes. Sometimes they are not born,
Mhm.
and that can cause a lot of confusion.
Yes, yeah. So it was for me, thankfully. And then they did the spinal tap, of course, and then that's when they confirmed a couple days later that it was GBS.
The high protein and the cell
Yeah.
count was high. Um, and the neck pain was still there, is it? Was it how dominant was it, even though you had this weakness? How bad was the
The,
pain compared to the other
the
side?
The pain was definitely the worst. And I was able to get on some morphine right away. And so then they actually admitted me to the hospital, obviously, because they need to monitor and see how severe my case was going to be. They couldn't predict. They said, you might be better in a couple days or you might be better in a month. We don't know. So they admitted me and, they gave me some morphine. And of course, it helped at first. And so when I woke up on a neurology ward. And I remember at first being like, I don't know if I need to be here. I'm not in pain anymore. I can go home. And then that's when I realized that the paralysis had spread. Basically, it was no longer weakness. It was now paralysis, and I could no longer move basically my entire body from the neck down. And then, the pain from there returned. It got stronger and stronger. That would have been, the inflammation in all of my nerves, and it did spread to the rest of my body. So it was in my neck, my back, my limbs, kind of everything. I had a lot of horrible sensations and was on a lot of medication, and it just kept getting worse. They were monitoring me, and it just continued to get worse. And within 72 hours, it affected my breathing, and I was put on a ventilator in ICU.
And that's when you said you were so helplessly paralyzed. There was nothing you could do.
No, I had a ventilator. I mean, I had a tube in my mouth, so I couldn't speak. My family was there. They brought my daughter to be with me, of course, and I couldn't do anything. I couldn't speak. I couldn't reach out and touch her. I couldn't do anything. And I was in ICU with, a breathing tube down my mouth, and I believed that I was dying. I didn't think that I was ever going to get out of there.
It must have been a very frightening time. You were fully conscious. You knew what was going on.
I did. That's the interesting part about ICU is a lot of people think, when you go to ICU, you're sedated, you're, in a coma. And I mean, that may be the case for some ICU patients, but for myself and for my specific case, I was fully conscious. So, I was very, very medicated, very out of it, but definitely knew exactly what was going on, was fully aware, fully conscious, and, just devastated that I was in this position. I had just given birth a few weeks before. It was my daughter, and I had been looking forward to being a mom. My first baby, right? So it was just such a devastating time to have this happen so suddenly and just realize, my life had changed so drastically. And they said, like, we don't know when you're going to get better.
Yeah, it's a very scary time. I can't even begin to imagine what it would be like, being in that situation. The one thing that struck me was you said you were nearly delusional and you had very few memories of that time. Is that because of the sedation and the medications you were on rather than
Yeah.
see?
Yeah, so I would say, yeah, the first few weeks, I mean, I do have a lot of memories, but a lot of it is just very, very foggy memories. And yes, that would be because of the severe medication that I was on because of the pain. The pain was just unbearable. And I remember them giving me just so many different types of medication, trying one after another, having pain specialists brought in and it barely working. But as time went on, they were able to get the pain under control, and then of course reduce the medication. And so then I was even more awake.
It's not usually taught the pain aspect of Guillain-Barre syndrome, and it can cause a lot of confusion when patients come in and they complain of pain and they're calling the surgeons to come and untrap nerves and things like that. So I'm glad your
Hmm.
doctors really were quite clued in. Um,
Hmm.
and then you were given this IVIG. Did it start on ICU or did you start it on the neurology ward?
No, they started on the neurology ward. They started actually even before they had the diagnosis. They were just pretty sure that that's what it was, just everything clinically pointed to it. And so they started the treatment. And then I was moved to ICU. And then, it's an interesting reason as to why they decided to stop the IVIG. They then switched to plasmapheresis, which is another treatment. So, I don't know exactly why they decided to switch from IVIG to plasmapheresis. My opinion is that they had a plasmapheresis machine there and they hadn't used it yet. And they wanted to try it out. So they switched to plasmapheresis, and I went through 5 days of that.
What
Yep.
about the IVIG's intravenous immunoglobulin, which is antibodies to mop up the antibodies causing the GBS? How many days were you on the IVIG before?
Just 2 days.
2 days. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many different protocols. Some are given over 5 days, and you can give the whole lot over 2 days. Um, it's difficult to judge. And the
Hmm.
plasmapheresis, were you getting worse on the IVIG before they swapped you over then?
Yes, I was getting worse. So maybe that's why that it just seemed to be going downhill. And then I went on the plasmapheresis, but it didn't seem, at the time, it didn't seem to help at all. It seemed like I just continued to get worse and worse. But looking at the long-term effects and looking where I am now and how incredible of a recovery I've had, you know, perhaps that it played a great part in the recovery of my nerves. So I can't say that it didn't do its job. It just at the moment didn't feel like it.
Yeah, we can't know the counterfactual, what would have happened if it's difficult.
Exactly.
But,
Exactly.
and you're on the ICU for, I mean, you said all your bodily functions were taken over. You could just about blink your eyes. Um, and then you started getting better. Is it after the 5 days? Is that when you started getting better?
No, it was a long time. It was nearly 6 weeks before I showed really any signs of improvement.
Oh,
Yeah, so it was heartbreaking for, the doctors, the family, everybody to see me in that state, to be giving me the IVIG, the plasmapheresis, and not seeing any improvements. So I was completely paralyzed, basically, yeah, from the eyes down. There was even one point that my eyes were affected and I couldn't see straight, and my eyes were kind of going all over the place. My mouth was paralyzed. But then after, yeah, it was about 6 weeks that things started to kind of get better, and it was so minuscule. Like when I say get better, it was like I could move my mouth a little bit more and I could move my fingertip. So that was the first sign of improvements. And then from there, it just kind of very, very, very slowly started to come back. I could start to move my hand, I could start to move my wrist, my neck a little bit, and then had to wean off the ventilator. That was the biggest part of recovery.
6 weeks at least 6 weeks on the ventilator.
So no, 6 weeks. 6 weeks was when I started to recover from the paralysis, but I was actually on a ventilator for 10 weeks before I was able to completely come off of it.
Okay, that's I had maybe I didn't read it properly. I thought things started getting better much earlier. Wow, that's a long time to.
Yeah, yeah. It was just over 2.5 months that I was on the ventilator.
Did you have any electrical studies? I can't remember whether you had some EMG
I
studies.
did. Yeah, I did have an EMG fairly quickly when I was diagnosed.
Okay.
And then I had another one probably about 2 months in as well.
And were those confirmatory? Sometimes you have the EMG and it doesn't give you, it doesn't support it.
Yeah,
Just have to just.
yeah, I know that's been so interesting. So, I mean, it did support it, of course, when I was first diagnosed. Yes, it did. It showed everything there. And then when I had the second EMG, which was about 2 months later, it showed the regeneration in the arms, but it showed nothing in the legs. So there was a little bit of hope lost at that point of what my recovery was going to look like. But it wasn't even that much longer after that is when my toes started moving again, and then my legs started to kind of regain that strength as well. So the EMG wasn't very promising at first, but then I was able to get some strength back in my legs.
Yeah, that nerves take their time. That's
Yes.
they need time. Um, and then you had a relapse, if I recollect. Things got better, and then you had a dip at some time.
Yeah, I did have a dip where, I just was starting to get better. I was, being able to use my hands again, able to use my neck and mouth words and stuff. And then all of a sudden I woke up one day and it was back to square one.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, so it was very heartbreaking, and then it really set things back for me, like, okay, am I actually going to get better? And I found it hard to believe. A lot of the doctors were saying, this is Guillain-Barre syndrome, you will get better one day, you're going to get out of ICU. You're very young. I was only 26 at the time. But when you're in ICU and you're paralyzed and you're getting better and then getting worse again, that's so hard to believe. But eventually I did again regain that strength and start to get better again.
And again, I can start to think or imagine the emotional turmoil. But you did have some reactions. You talked about feeling the injustice of all this and why I'm being punished. Did you feel fate had picked on you unfairly at the time?
Absolutely, I did. And I just felt like it was so unfair that this was happening to me, at this time in my life. I felt like it could have happened any time, but why did it have to happen to me, right after the birth of my daughter? I live in Canada. It's freezing cold in January. That was when my daughter was born. So we barely even left the house. We hadn't even done anything. I'd barely introduced her to friends and family yet. And so I had this whole future plan for us. And then now it was gone. And I didn't even know, if I was going to get out of ICU. And if I did get out of ICU, was I going to be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life? I really had no idea. GBS at the time, I had nothing to go on. I didn't know anybody else that had it. I was just kind of going what the doctors were saying. I'd never heard of it before. And so I really just had no idea what my future looked like, if I even had one, if I was going to make it out. And I just felt so robbed. Like, I was finally a mom, and then I lost the chance to be her mother, and it was heartbreaking.
And something else you talked about was um, some feeling of resentment towards everyone around you. And you say you didn't do well at hiding your bitterness. Um, what was driving this? Was it the illness, do you think, or it's kind of just the
No, you know what it was? It was the fact that it was a bittersweet experience to have my daughter there. So having her there, I was able to see her every day. So they brought her in every morning to be with me. They would put her on my chest. They wanted to make sure that, we kept that connection and that bond. So she was there every single day with me, and it was wonderful and it was encouraging. But on the other hand, it was heartbreaking to not be able to be her mom. And so there was a lot of resentment because I would see my family members holding her, caring for her, changing her, bottle feeding her because I couldn't breastfeed anymore because of the medications. And so it was just devastating to me. And yeah, it was hard to see my family raising my baby
right in front of you.
right in front of me.
Yeah. Um, and just going back, I mean, a lot of cases of Guillain-Barre syndrome is because people had some infection 2 or 3 weeks before then, but you didn't have any cough or any diarrhea or anything before then.
No, I didn't. I mean, the only thing that happened was that I had given birth 3 weeks prior, and it can come on from pregnancy or childbirth, so it's possible that could be the trigger. Of course, we'll never know for sure, but
And surgery as well has been.
exactly, surgery as well. So having the C-section, so.
But it doesn't stop you from the usual question is why me? I'm sure you must have asked that question.
Absolutely. Yeah, I asked that a lot. And I was in such a dark place. And, my family was trying to be strong. My doctors were trying to be so strong and supportive and saying, you're going to get through this. They were so incredible, the nurses. But it was tough for me to be strong. And because I just was like, why is this happening to me? And I don't think I can get through this. And the pain was so severe for such a long time. I was also dealing with a lot of nausea from all the medications and everything. So I just felt awful all the time, and not being able to do anything, talk, communicate. It was just everything. And there were times that I didn't want to keep fighting. The doctors would say, you got to keep fighting. You're going to get through this. And I would say, I don't want to. There was times that I
Mm,
asked them to shut off the ventilator because I just couldn't go on anymore.
mm.
But, my daughter being there, I said it was bittersweet, but it was definitely motivation that I wanted to get back to her. And I actually found another, or the doctors found another GBS patient
Okay.
who had recovered from GBS. And so when they saw me, in that state of depression, not having any hope to kind of keep going, they brought him in to show me that there was someone else who had been where I had been and recovered. And that was a huge turning point for me.
That's good. That's good. Um, and I think you said it, somebody told you you were never going to walk again. Was it one of the doctors?
No, the doctor didn't say I would never walk again, but he did say that he wasn't sure. He said, the EMG isn't very promising. You may not walk for at least 2 years, is what they predicted, and even then, they couldn't predict what my recovery would be like. So that I remember that day still very, very vividly. And I was starting to get better, and I was getting better off the ventilator. I was able to last a few minutes at a time, and I was regaining strength, and I was able to hold my daughter in my arms at that time. And so I was starting to get a lot of hope. And then to have the doctor tell me that, it was like, okay, maybe I'm not going to get better. Maybe my life is going to be a lot different than what I'm hoping.
Would it have been different? Would you have preferred if you were to ignore the EMG? We've seen people recover even when the
I
EMG.
think so. And I mean, I did have other doctors as well that, did say that as time went on, which was helpful. And I've learned so much about GBS since then that, sometimes the EMGs aren't right. And even, GBS is just so different for everybody. We really don't know. It's so hard to predict how somebody's case is going to go, what their recovery is going to look like, what residuals they're going to be left with. I mean, it's impossible to say. So I think it is important for people to know, we don't know what it's going to look like, but I think there's always room for hope, and that encouragement that you can keep fighting, you should keep fighting, and we'll see what happens. But you definitely got to keep fighting.
Yeah, I think that hope is the most important at that stage, really.
Absolutely.
And and yeah, so you started walking after, is it 5 months?
Yeah, so after I got out of ICU, I moved back to the neurology ward. Yeah, it was funny because I mean I was 26 and I was on this neurology ward with mostly stroke patients or very geriatric patients. I was the youngest one on the ward. But yeah, it was amazing, and I got to re-strengthen my body, and I had to learn how to do everything again. So I had to, learn how to hold cutlery and how to feed myself and how to brush my hair and my teeth. And eventually I was able to like hold my daughter in my arms in my hospital bed, and just regained my strength, and went through some pretty intense physiotherapy learning how to walk again. It was, yeah, about 5 months before I was able to walk without a walker anymore.
God bless these physios. They really put you through
Yes, they
tasks.
were incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, they're very indefatigable. They push and push,
Hmm.
and then some months after you are back to work. What is the stage of how are you now? Are you, would you say 100%, or are there any residuals at
I
all?
would say, it's interesting. I would say I'm probably like 99%. I do have some residuals, and I did have residuals for quite a while. I still deal with nerve pain from time to time. So especially when I'm tired, if I haven't had great sleeps, or if I'm really stressed, I do notice that I get some tingling in my fingers, my arms, and my feet. And I dealt with that pretty severely for a few years after going through GBS. So I was on some medication for several years. I'm not anymore. It's pretty mild. So I think I'm very, very fortunate to not have to deal with severe pain. I mean, it's been almost 14 years now, but I do still have a little bit. I have some strange weakness in certain parts. So certain parts of my body are just still weaker than average. But I got into exercise after I went through my journey, and I realized how helpful, physiotherapy and exercise was to my recovery. So I really fell in love with it. And so some parts of my body are even stronger than I was before GBS. So it's very interesting. I do think, I've had a pretty much complete recovery. I still deal with, fatigue from time to time as well. Where I just feel like I hit a wall and I need to sit down because my legs are just exhausted. But overall, I am able to do everything that I could do before and more.
So apart from making you more exercise conscious, how has it changed you as a person? Has it changed
Oh,
your
it changed. Yeah, it changed me completely. After I got out of the hospital and after especially when I was home with my daughter again, by the time I got home, I mean, it was 126 days that I had spent in the hospital. So my daughter was almost 6 months old. So I missed, the first
yeah,
5 months of her life.
yeah.
And to be at home with her was just so rewarding and so happy. And I had this new sense of gratitude. Like, now I could change her diaper, and now I could pick her up, and now I could go for walks with her. So it just gave me this gratitude that I would have never had before, if I would have never, appreciated life the way that I did now. And it gave me such appreciation for just the little things that we can do, holding a cup and brushing my teeth and going for a walk, being
Yeah.
able to speak, being able to breathe on my own. It just really made me appreciate those things. And it also made me, realize how short life is, how quickly life can change. So it definitely made me, spend more time with family, reach out to people that I hadn't talked to in a long time. Yeah, it really changed me, who I was as a person, and for the better. And it's funny to look back on now. I mean, it's been 14 years, but I wouldn't change it for the world. I truly believe that it made me who I am and made me the person that I am today.
Yeah, adversity leading to resilience and appreciation, um, it's a good perspective. A lot of people actually say they wouldn't change
Hmm.
because it's kind of made them different. And did it affect your relationships? You talked about your ex-husband.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, he was incredible. He was there the entire time through my journey. He was at my bedside taking care of my daughter. He pretty much raised her while I was gone. And it was, incredible to have him there. But over time, our relationship did change. And I would say that it's partially because of going through GBS and just making me really internalize, what I went through, what he went through, who we were as people, who we were as parents. And it changed us both in very different ways. And so it did, affect our relationship. And after it was about 2.5 years after my experience with GBS, we
Mm.
did separate. We're still in each other's lives. He's still a part of my life and a part of my daughter's life. And, life just kind of goes that way sometimes. But everything worked out, I believe, in the way that it was meant to be.
Yeah, we change as people because of experience, and you're a different person in some ways.
Absolutely.
And then you got involved. Tell me about your involvement in this GBS CIDP Foundation of Canada. Is it still active? Is it still
It is, yeah, yeah, it's very active. Yeah. So shortly after I recovered, I had found out that there was this community of other people. When I was in ICU, I remember them telling me, like, you have Guillain Barre syndrome. I remember at the time not even being able to pronounce it because it was so difficult. And it took me, I think, several months before I could finally do it. And then I found out that there was not only, other people that had this disease. When I was in ICU, I thought I was like the only person in the world
Mm.
because they said, this is so rare. And so I felt like I was the only one that had it. And then when I got out of the hospital and realized, no, there's quite a few people that have gone through this, and there are other survivors out there. And not only survivors, there's also a foundation, in Canada as well as the US. So I reached out to them. I wanted to give back in any way. I said, I want to go into the hospital and visit patients. Now that I've recovered, I want to show people that, when I was in ICU, I didn't have hope. And then I had a patient come and visit me, show me that he recovered, and I want to do the same. So that's what I did. And I got involved with them quite quickly, and started volunteering with them, visiting patients in the ICU, in the hospital, doing different events, raising awareness, and then eventually moved to their board of directors.
Okay. You're still there at the moment
I
with.
am still there. Yep, yep. Yeah, it's an amazing organization. We're a small little organization in Canada. We do a lot of partnering though with the US Foundation as well, and I've been able to go to many conferences in Canada and in the US as well, to their symposiums, meet so many people that have gone through GBS, meet so many people as well that have gone through CIDP, which is like the more chronic version, and meet neurologists, all the specialists. It's just fascinating, and being in part of that community, it's so rewarding, and it's just very fascinating for me to learn more and more and more about the disease and how it impacts people and how it changes people's lives. And yeah, it's just been great to be a part of that organization.
Good. It's invaluable, I think, for a disease to have this kind of charity behind it. Um, there's a limit to how much the healthcare system has for how much it can do to help. Um, and your daughter, how old is she now?
She's 13 years old. So, yeah, coming up on my 14-year anniversary, so close to her 14th birthday. And yeah, it's wild. Like, obviously she doesn't remember. She was a newborn, but she's seen the pictures, the videos. She's read parts of my book. She knows so much about my story. She knows everything that I went through. So, I think it is such a big piece of her life as well. And she was the star of the show. Everybody loved her. When I was in ICU, everybody was just enthralled by her, and she was just so cute, and so everybody remembers her so much from my story. And I've had a lot of videos go viral over the years, of my time in the hospital, and she's always that star of the video that everyone just loves. So it's wild to see where she is now. She's almost 14 years old. Time has passed, and it's crazy to just look back on, but I do think it's completely changed our relationship for the better. It just made me so appreciative to be her mom, and it just gave us this strong connection that I don't think we would have had we not gone through GBS together.
You're not spoiling her more than she should. You haven't spoiled.
Maybe.
Okay. Okay. A lot of lessons in the book, obviously, appreciation and uh, kind of giving back. Are there any other lessons you would like readers to take away from the book?
Everybody kind of has a story. Everybody goes through challenges. Some are small, some are big. But when you're going through a challenge, no matter how big or small, it's tough. And sometimes we get into these state of minds where we don't think that we can get out of it. We think that we're going to be there forever. I know that's what I certainly felt like. And you do lose hope. And so reminding yourself that, there are people all over the world that recover from illnesses and many other tragedies, and they come out of it and they get on the other side. And it's like situations like myself where I even come out happier and stronger and better than I was before. So just reminding yourself that, I think we as human beings were a lot stronger than we realize. We don't know that we're strong, that we're able to handle it, that we're able to get through it until we've gotten to the other side. So it's just really reminding yourself that, it's tough right now and it's not going to be easy, but you have to just keep that faith and keep that hope that things are going to get better. And, that's what happened with me. And I think my story is a great reminder that I went from literally paralyzed from the neck down, unable to move anything, unable to speak, unable to do anything, and to come back to be in the best shape of my life, being a mom, living life. I think that's a great testament that, we can overcome anything.
Perfect. That's that's a very important lesson. Um, and I mean, you're probably well, you should be an expert on GBS at the moment. What may not be a fair question. What do you think are the outstanding scientific things we haven't resolved about GBS? Is there any outstanding question, uncertainty that you kind of wish?
I mean, yeah, I have learned quite a bit about GBS over the years. It's been just so fascinating to learn all the different things about it and why certain things happen. I think, we need a cure. I think it would be incredible if one day we could say, this is GBS, here's your treatment, and you're better now, right? I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done as well to just figure out the triggers, why that there's triggers for some people and why there seems to be no triggers for others. There's some people that can't place it. It's just seemed to come on so suddenly. It's such a wild disorder that affects people of all ages, and it really does devastate lives because of typically how suddenly it comes on. And when you're dealing with a severe case with like paralysis and ventilator, it really does completely rock people's worlds. And so, just that awareness I think is great as well for people to understand what it is and what it can do to somebody. I had a lot of people that, said, "Oh, you were in ICU, what happened to you?" Like they just really didn't understand that I was paralyzed, that I went through so much pain and just everything that I had to get back, all the therapy that I had to go through for my arms and my legs. So I think it's just that's why I wrote the book, really to bring awareness to the entire journey of what GBS is. It's not just like this sudden thing that happens. It really is kind of a lifelong thing.
Yeah, neurology is the big jungle in medicine at the moment. We're still struggling to understand a lot of our disorders, but we'll get there. I'm sure we will.
Hmm.
Um, okay. Yeah. Have you written any other books? I know you write a lot. Any other books? Or
I'm writing right now, actually. I'm writing a book. I don't know if I'll publish it one day or not, but I am writing. And it's basically just, after I went through everything in the hospital, I wrote life support. Life support really is about, majority of it is about my time in the hospital, and a little bit of what my life was like before and a little bit what my life was like after. I am writing a book now about kind of the afterlife of GBS, so the last 14 years of how GBS has affected me, how it impacted my relationships, how it changed me, how I've lived with the residuals and how the residuals have impacted my day-to-day life, affected my work life, affected my like my body, and as well as the struggles of, is it coming back? So I've had many times where I've gone through bouts of fatigue and increases in nerve pain and wondering, am I getting GBS again? And actually going to the hospital. And so there's all that fear that you go through as well. Like, is this going to come back? Am I going to get GBS again? So those emotions. And so that's what the book is about.
okay. That will be an interesting case study for people in.
Hmm.
I I'm not sure that there's been this kind of long look at the outcome. That
Exactly.
maybe that I don't know, but it would be interesting to know what it is like 14 years
Hmm.
severe,
Exactly.
really the severe end of GBS.
Yes,
Well, if you do publish it, let me know. We
I
might
will for sure.
bring you back and pick you up on that. Um,
Absolutely.
and apart from the GBS CIDP Foundation, are you involved in any other projects? So those are the,
Nope,
yeah.
just that one. Yeah, we're quite busy. We're a small but mighty organization. We do a lot of conferences, a lot of support groups as well, connecting people all over the country, doing a lot of awareness campaigns and fundraising as well.
Okay, perfect. Well, I hope this video goes viral so everybody knows what your charity is doing. Any books you want to recommend or suggest to to people about GBS or about the brain or any issue, any theme at all?
Yeah, I mean, there is multiple GBS books. There's one, I don't know exactly the name, but I think it's like Guillain Barre syndrome for the lays person or something like that. I think it's really important. Like if you have a family member going through GBS, I think it is great to read up on GBS, learn about it as quickly as possible so that you really understand. So I think, having a medical book is great. And then having a patient book as well. So, I mean, Life Support, my book is great. There are many, many others out there, even on Amazon. Everybody's case is so unique. So my case was so severe. I think I did a really great job of really walking through the progression of my case. I think that I know that I've had people from all over the world reach out to me and say, like, you were able to explain exactly what I felt when I was in the hospital, and my family was so grateful because they could actually understand what I was feeling. But there's other books as well, so I think it's really important to understand that everyone's case is unique, and read up on stories and learn about it.
So, accompanying this interview, there's a monologue I'm doing, and one or two other patient memoirs I was going to talk about there as well. So, okay, Holly Francis, thank you very much for participating in this podcast. I really enjoyed the insights you've given and the lessons you've learned from such a devastating but reversible condition. And to my audience, thank you very much for your time, whether you were watching or listening. Before the next episode of the podcast, you might want to subscribe either to the YouTube, Spotify, or iTunes channels so that you don't miss the next episode. And whilst waiting for the next episode, I have a neurology website called Neuro Checklist, and I've written a book called Surfing the Brain, which you might want to have a look at. Holly, thank you very much for your time. I'm most grateful. And regards to your daughter.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's wonderful to get to talk to you about GBS.
Thank you very much.